everyone, and welcome into Stacking the Box. I am Matt Verderame. It is August 23rd, and we have a very important and we have a very different show for you today, and I will tell you why. So, originally, this was going to just be a normal run-of-the-mill show, but that's not going to be the case this time around because Mark Carman is going to Ireland to watch his Northwestern Wildcats as they open up the college football season over in Dublin. But when he comes back, Carm will no longer be doing Stacking the Box. He's going elsewhere. And I won't say where because that's Carm's business, and I'll let him handle that when he gets back from across the pond. But we've had our last show together. And so I want to be the one to tell you. I'll tell you who's going to be replacing him in a minute and what to expect this upcoming season. But first, I wanted to give a few words on Carm. Listen, I have worked with Mark Carman for 7 years. We've done this podcast together for almost 5. He took over when a good buddy and still coworker, Josh Hill, had some change in his workflow and he couldn't do it anymore. And so Carm stepped up. And depending on how long you've listened to this podcast, you kind of know the story. But for those who don't, Carm took over as the host. And Jeff Schwartz came in for a while and did a year with us. And that was great. That was for a lot of the Chief fans out there the year they won the Super Bowl. And then Carm and I have been doing it ever since. And of course, Ben Heisler has since joined us and become a staple of the show. And Ben will still be here. He's not going anywhere. His role will remain the exact same. But you work with a lot of people in your life, okay? And most of the people that you work with, you say goodbye to at some point, and you think sparingly about them as you move on. It's no knock on that, but it's reality. You don't have every second of every day to sit there and think about those who you used to work with because those people have moved on. They have their lives. You have yours, so on and so forth, right? Carm will not be one of those people for me. Look, we make fun of each other all the time. The show, we make fun of each other all the time off the show. We have a lot of fun. We're goofy, but Carm has really been there for a lot of the moments in my life that have really mattered. Carm was at my wedding. I was invited to Carm's wedding. Regrettably couldn't attend, but would have loved to. We've spent time together away from work, and the best compliment I can give Carm is he's one of the best people I know. I don't know anybody who knows Mark Carman and doesn't love him, doesn't have a nice word to say about him. He is the epitome of what you'd want in a friend, and I will miss doing the show with him greatly, but I'll also just miss being around him as much as we've been around each other for these past 7 years. And, look, I think the one thing that has to be said too is we've known each other for 7 years. Our lives have changed a lot in those years, both at work and away from it. But on a personal note, Carm has often believed in me more than I've believed in myself at the moment. I mean, he's always been somebody. We talked last night. And we left that conversation with him giving me a lot of words of encouragement. I mean, he's always felt greater about me a lot of times than I have in this profession, just not because I don't have confidence in myself. I certainly do, but because Carm has always seen more in me maybe than I saw in that initial moment. And that's a rare quality in someone to, not only try to make themselves successful, but to lift up people around them. And Carm's always done that. He's always been a team guy, a team player. He's always been there. And that kind of brings me full circle with this podcast because, this was my baby. This was my brainchild a little over 5 years ago. Carm didn't have to take this thing seriously. Carm didn't have to necessarily care. I mean, sure, it was his job to show up and do the pod. And, it was one of his many jobs here. But he didn't. It wasn't as though Carm was going to be looked upon any differently if he just kind of showed up, went through the motions. Like he has his own podcast in the Windy City, right? And he has other responsibilities. This was something that was kind of foisted on him when Josh could no longer be part of the pod. He had other things he had to do. He's just moving up the company. And I think for him to take it seriously, to be prepared every week, to really, frankly, to give a shit. I'm very, very grateful for that. With him because there are very few people who you genuinely enjoy being around day in and day out, right? I see your friends, right? I think a lot of us have friends who we enjoy seeing. I don't know if you'd want to see them all the time. I don't know if you'd want to see them every single day. But Carm was always somebody who you always wanted to see be around, and I think there's something to the idea that when you want to be around somebody all the time, when you want to see them on a day in, day out basis, that speaks to who that person is. And I can't give a higher compliment other than to say genuinely, Carm is one of the best people I know. It's not just, oh yeah, he's a good guy. Like Carm's one of the best human beings I know, personally, professionally. The place he's going to is not only getting somebody that they're really going to enjoy in the workplace because of how hard he works, they're going to enjoy him because of how good of a person he is. And I'll miss him greatly. I'll remain friends with him. But these are things that happen. They move on. And by the way, I should also say, well, I can't see where he's going. I don't feel like that'd be right. I'm very happy for him. I'm very excited for him. I will root for his success every step of the way, and I know he'll find it. But that's where I'll leave it. I also should note, as my producer Sean notes, he does still owe me dinner. Son of a bitch. I've got to make sure I get that before he heads out of town. Okay. But and I'll collect. I'll try to collect in a big way. We'll see if we can make it happen. But I miss Carm greatly. I already do. That being said, to spin this thing forward, I want to note that we're not going anywhere. The podcast is not going anywhere. In fact, it's expanding. So we're going to have the Tuesday shows we do all the time throughout the entirety of the week. Okay, that's not going anywhere. We're going to be here. No worries. And I'm going to announce who the new host or co-host is in a second. Like I said earlier, Heisler going nowhere. Same deal. We're also now going to have a Sunday show. It's going to be in the mornings. It's going to be an hour before kickoff. It's going to be 11 to noon Central. Okay, 12 to 1 Eastern. I won't go into the whole thing, but we're going to preview the whole league, rapid fire. It's going to be a lot of fun. And I hope you all are there for it. I look forward to it. I think it'll be a good time. So you're going to get double the stack in the box during the season. Well, again, the Tuesday show, the Sunday show. And I really think, look, it's going to be a lot of fun. I really look forward to being part of it, doing more of it. Hoping to have some clips, maybe come out more and more and more on the channel. So if you aren't subscribed on the YouTube channel, please do so. I think you'll enjoy it. You'll get a lot more stack in the box. The downside is you have to see me. These are things that we have to deal with. All right. With all that being said, have a new co-host. And he's also somebody I've worked with for a long time and know very, very well. And is somebody who I think personality-wise will fit right into the show. And is somebody who I trust tremendously with his NFL knowledge, his college football knowledge, something where I certainly lack in. And that is going to be Cody Williams, who's going to be joining us here in a second. Cody is an editor at FanSided.com. He's been in the company forever. He might even predate me, honestly. If he doesn't, it's damn close. Cody is going to have a lot of fun with us here this year. We will. I feel like the tenor of the show is not going to change much with Cody coming on board. We will introduce him here in just a second, but I think Cody is going to really slide right in seamlessly. Obviously, Carm, big shoes to fill, but at the same point, that's the nature of the beast, right? The show must go on, and it will go on. I am not going anywhere. Heisler's not going anywhere. We're essentially making a Cody for Carm trade. I feel like there's good value on both sides, and I'm looking forward to going forward here with who is now my third co-host on the show, Josh Hill, Mark Carman, and now Cody Williams will be here on the Tuesdays. On the Sunday show, we'll get into that a little bit more maybe next week as some things get finalized. But I'll be here for Tuesday and Sundays. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun as we get everything rolling. So with that, Cody, welcome to Stack in the Box.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm excited. You're right. Carm is a big shoes to fill, but
it's Carm.
Carm.
Coach, you've got
Carm.
Have a ton of fun. I'm gonna miss the show tremendously. Tremendous hands, double tremendous. That's 3, and I'll be in the content. So we are, by the way, live. There is some noise. The Walter at Center on the campus of Northwestern University, about to head off to big game Saturday. The Cats and the Force. So I got 38 seconds, but I love you guys.
Well, we love you too, Carm. We also, this is fitting that you're just in a field somewhere trying to do this podcast. So that is about the most fitting way this could have possibly ended. Carm in a field, you can hear every fifth word. That's perfect. That's perfect. Well, thank you for popping on, Carm. I eulogized your podcast time here, so you can go back and listen. But this was fitting. This is of course. This would be the way that this is, the end here. So
love you, Carm.
Right. That's Carm.
Cody, good luck.
That's Carm.
Thank you to all the listeners, by the way. Appreciate everybody's support.
There he is, Mark Carman, for the last time on Stacking the Box. Oh, I'm sure we'll have him as a guest at some point, if for no other reason to make fun of him or the Bears or whatever we can possibly trash. Yeah, that's so Cody. I mean, I kind of gave you an intro, man. I don't know if I did it justice. You want to just kind of tell people who you are, give a little background on your football life?
Oh yeah, it's been quite a football life. NFL Network's already, got the rights to it. But so I started with FanSided as a contributor about 7 years ago, and worked with Verderame closely then. I think you had just started, so our timelines very much coincide at FanSided. And worked as a contributor there. I bounced around all the network sites multiple times, and then I ended up at NFL Spin Zone, the all-encompassing NFL site on the network. I worked there as the lead editor for about three and a half years, and then last October I got hired with FanSided.com as kind of just a general sports editor. But now I'm heading up the college sports section. But as Verderame can attest, I still very much contribute with NFL and a whole lot of other stuff too. But I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Well, we're glad to have you. We're gonna get right into it. Right, we've got a packed show. It's the same show as it normally is, again, except for Carm being out. Although now we had a Carm appearance, and it was about the most fitting thing possible. All right, so we're gonna go into the future. We're gonna jump right into it. What is more likely, the Saints or the Vikings winning their division?
For me, I have the Saints winning the South, and it's pretty close, honestly. But I think that it all comes down to the competition within the division. I mean, the Panthers and Falcons, I think, have a chance to be two of the worst teams in the league, and so that's conceivably 4 wins for the Saints right there, because I do have some faith in Jameis Winston. I mean, he was good last year before he got hurt. And then you look at the Bucks, and obviously they have Brady, but that offensive line is falling apart. Like, they already have 2 very serious interior offensive line injuries that they have to worry about. And then on top of that, they actually have a really soft opening schedule that I think they could start 4-1. The last 12 games are a little difficult, but I think with the division games, really boosting their confidence, I think they can get to 10 wins. And with the Bucks' current state, I think that opens the door for them to potentially win the South. Whereas the Vikings, I just don't see them as a better team than the Packers, just point blank.
Yeah, I debated this because on one hand, I'm like, well, the Packers have had multiple heartbreaking playoff defeats in recent years. Rodgers, I know, is coming off back-to-back MVP years, but you do wonder, like, at some point here, does he start to decline a little bit? Their receivers have declined. But I love the Packers' defense. I think the Packers defensively are going to be a lot better than people think. Rodgers will make those receivers better than they are. And I cannot in my mind get past, like, Kirk Cousins has to beat out Rodgers in that division. Like, that ultimately, and I'm not even like a Kirk Cousins hater, but like I can't get there. I can't look at this and go, yeah, I think that's going to happen. So I'm with you. I'm going with the Saints. I picked the Bucs to go to the Super Bowl back when the schedule was released. That was before Ryan Jensen got hurt and Aaron Stinnie got hurt. And now we're not sure if Chris Godwin's going to open the season on time. And Mike Evans has a hamstring injury. And Tom Brady just got back from a vacation. We don't know why. Like, I have a lot of concerns about the Bucs. If you ask me, do I think they'll win the division? Yeah, I still think they'd win the division. I would still take them. But who's more likely is the question. I think the Saints are a pretty, like, look, if you put the quarterback aside with the Saints, they're really good. Like, that team is a really talented team. The question is just, what Jameis Winston are you getting? Are you getting decent Jameis? Are you getting resurgent Jameis? Or are you getting, oh my God, 30 interceptions again, Jameis? Like, that's the, also, like, Dennis Allen, good as a coordinator. I don't know what the hell he is as a coach, but I'm willing to give him a shot here.
Yeah, and I also, like, thinking about the Vikings, like, I'm still worried about the defense. I actually think the offense and Kirk Cousins, I think Kevin O'Connell is going to be great for them. Like, I think, if you're a fantasy player, target Vikings in your fantasy drafts because I think that offense is going to be really, really productive. But at the same time, I'm still worried about that defense. Like, they didn't look good under Zimmer, and part of that might have been Zimmer, but also I think there's some weaknesses personnel-wise. So I think when you're looking at that team, and then you have a Packers team who, their floor is so high because Rodgers is on that offense, and then you have a defense that I think could legitimately be a top 5 unit in the league this year with all the talent that they've acquired. I think that just makes it incredibly unlikely for the Vikings to, usurp them in the division. I still think the Vikings can make the playoffs, but I think it's unlikely that they win the North.
All right. So who is going to have more receiving yards this season? Is it going to be Gabriel Davis, who a lot of people think is going to break out in Buffalo, especially after that playoff game he had in Kansas City, 4 touchdowns? Or is it going to be Juju Smith-Schuster, who obviously is coming to Kansas City from Pittsburgh after spending his first, I believe it was 5 years there?
I'm one of the people buying a Gabriel Davis breakout season, and so I'm going with Gabriel Davis on this one. And honestly, I think it's because of the role that he's going to play in the Bills' offense more so than, and that might sound counterintuitive because I think Juju is going to be the top target getter or wide receiver for the Chiefs, but it all comes down to like the types of targets that those guys get. When you look at Juju's like last couple years in Pittsburgh, in 2020, he had an average depth of target of just 5.6 yards. And then last year it was 6.1 in the little limited amount that he played. Whereas opposed to Davis, he had an ADOT of 12.9 last year. And that was down from 15 in 2020. So you're looking at those downfield targets for Davis. He's more of a big play wide receiver. I think Juju probably like leads this competition in receptions, but I think if we're talking more receiving yards, I think the types of targets that Davis is going to be getting is going to push him ahead in that category.
Man, it's funny. I sat there and literally put it in my answer like 5 times because I've loved Gabriel Davis since he was a rookie. Like, I really, really like him. I wasn't shocked last year in the playoffs when he had the game that he had. I don't think anybody expects 200 yards and 4 touchdowns, but I thought he could be very much productive. I said Juju for one. You actually alluded to it. I think he's going to have a million receptions on this team. Like, I just think the volume of it. The other question I have, and you're right, like he saw a lot of close to the line of scrimmage type targets in Pittsburgh. I also look at that and go, is that because for Roethlisberger last year, a deep ball was like a 10-yard pass? Like, I don't know that he'll be used like that in Kansas City, right? Where like Mahomes, like, all kidding aside, the question should have been, who could throw the ball further at this point, Roethlisberger or Mahomes left-handed? Like, I actually think like it'd be a borderline competition, right? Like,
oh, absolutely.
So there's a part of me that says I think Davis is going to go over 1,000 yards. By the way, I think he's going to be very, very good this year in Buffalo, because if you're playing Buffalo, how do you defend them? Well, you've got to roll cover over Diggs, right? I mean, you have to. So Davis is going to be seeing all these situations, you would think, where he's getting man coverage, he's one-on-one. I think he's going to eat. Kelsey's always going to be their number one target as long as he's there. But I think with Juju, it's hard to double him because they're going to just spread you out with all these, whether it's Moore or Hardman or MVS or Kelsey, or, so I think it's really close. I think it's going to be something where Davis has like 70 catches for 1,000 yards and Juju has like 94 catches for 1,100 yards or something like that. I think both are going to have very good years.
Yeah, the other thing that worries me too is Juju's already been banged up in the preseason and he's coming off an injury. And so I wonder, like, if he's going to be getting that volume, I wonder if he has the ability to hold up too. So that also factored into me going with Davis because he's not a guy who's really had a whole lot of injury history now. And like you said, they're in similar situations in terms of they're not the number one target in the passing offense. So they're going to have favorable matchups most of the time.
Very fair. I think that's all true. Smith-Schuster's been dealing with a sore knee. Doesn't sound too serious, but he has been out for almost a week. All right, let's stay in the AFC. Does Mike Tomlin have another winning season? I put this on here because for those who don't know, and I'm sure you know if you follow football, he has never had a losing season. I believe he's had a couple 500 years. Of course, now that's impossible to have. Do the Steelers win at least 9 games this season?
I just can't see it. I really can't see it. Like the one reason that you would point to would be the defense because this defense is still incredible. I mean, there's stars at every level. Well, maybe not linebacker. I take that back, but there are stars at multiple levels.
Yeah, Devin Bush doesn't qualify anymore.
Yeah, right. But I mean, you look at this defense, and they barely eked out a above 500 season last year with Big Ben at the helm. And granted, Big Ben was a shell of what he once was, but I still think the offense is going to be worse, specifically because of the quarterback play. The offensive line hasn't notably improved. Like that offensive line is absolute dog shit. Like it is absolutely terrible. Did you see the clips of Kendrick Green getting absolutely bull rushed multiple times in the last preseason game? It was horrendous. Yes. And he started at center last year. And like now he's in the left guard competition. So like they don't have answers on the offensive line. I mean, they have the weapons, obviously, Najee Harris, Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, George Pickens, they have weaponry, but Mitch Trubisky or Kenny Pickett is throwing to them. And both of those guys you have Kenny Pickett, who is clearly not processing the field well. Like that's why he hasn't won the job yet, because he's putting up numbers, but you watch him and he's not going through his progressions the way they want him to. And you have Mitch Trubisky, who we've seen, and the only reason he's in the quarterback competition is because he's mobile, and so they think that he can buy time when behind this awful offensive line. And so I just don't think the offense is good enough for them to be above 500. Of course, I feel like there is some voodoo magic in the works, and you say that it's impossible to finish 500. Watch Mike Tomlin go 8-1 this year. Watch it happen.
He did have a tie last year against the Lions, so he didn't roll anything out. Man, I thought about this because there's a part of me that I just completely agree with you. And I'm like, look, their offensive line is atrocious. I mean, that is one of the 5 worst offensive lines in football. They cannot block. Okay. And Roethlisberger, who was basically a corpse with a helmet last year. I mean, one thing about him, he knew the offense and get rid of the ball. So it at least somewhat mitigated that front. If Kenny Pickett's back there, like they're probably going to call a bunch of quick hitters. He's not going to be able to read things as easily. The other side of that is I've seen Steelers fans say, well, now without Roethlisberger, they'll be able to stretch the field. They can't block. There's no way to block. However, all that said, the other side of me is like, Tomlin always finds a way. And that team last year was horrific and made the playoffs. They made the playoffs. I have no idea. I remember when they got in, they played Kansas City in the wild card game. And I had multiple people who follow this, who were real, like actual followers of the team. Were like, yeah, they're going to win that game. I was like, bro, there's no chance. There's no chance in the world they're winning that game. And after getting up 7-0 on a TJ Watt score of all things, they proceeded to immediately give up 42 straight points. I have to come down on this as I do not think they're going to have a winning season. First of all, Cincinnati's really good. I do not think they're going to regress like a lot of people. Baltimore is the forgotten son of the AFC. Everybody and their mother forgets about that team. That team won 8 games last year and basically heading for them by the end of the season. Like the Browns, I don't know what the hell to make of the Browns. So like if you're a Steelers fan, you want to sit there and say, hey, we're better than them. Okay, I can hear that based on the suspension, but that is not going to be an easy schedule. They are going to play a lot of good teams. I think they're around 500 because of the coaching and the defense. But that offense, man, I feel like they're going to get into a lot of games where they're going to have to score 23 points. And it ain't happening. They have no ability to move the ball.
Yeah, I agree. And then to your point about the Browns, like, is Jacoby Brissett that much different than Baker Mayfield in terms of like the ceiling that it gives the offense? And so, like, if you look at it through that lens, like, all the other pieces are basically the same. And the Browns were a better team, in my opinion, at least, than the Steelers last year. So, I mean, you say you split that series, that's 1-1, and I think the Steelers could go 1-5 in the division pretty easily.
There's a part of me. I think Mayfield's better than Brissett, not like wildly, but I think he's better. But I just think the Browns are a crap show, like an unmitigated crap. If you're in that locker room, you've got to just be like, what the fuck's happening? Like, what is going on day in, day out, right? Like maybe now it's a little more settled because you have the suspension, you know it's what. But I mean, you can't. Let's put it this way: you can't feel great right now if you're a Cleveland Brown. You can't be like, you know what, guys, this has gone really, really well to this point. Like I'm in that stuff. Like I think at some point there is just like I will say this for the Steelers. They will be focused on winning football games. That team will come out and be, which is why, by the way, I think they'll be around 500. It's the same thing I think about New England. New England, I think, even has less talent than Pittsburgh. I think New England, talent-wise, is borderline awful. But I think we'll win 7 or 8 games based on the fact that they will not beat themselves. They will outcoach like 4 teams that they play, beat them just based off that. And Mac Jones will have 2 or 3 games where he plays really well, and they'll win. And then you'll have teams that are more talented than both those teams games because it's just an absolute disaster from the second they get into the building.
No, you're 100% right. I don't know how that locker room looks at everything that's been going on and is completely focused on football, or has been, I should say. But yeah, the Browns are a clown show. It's unbelievable.
I mean, look, everybody's like, well, the Browns, how could they be this bad for this long? Just look at a picture of Jimmy Haslam. That's how. Okay, that's how. There's a common. It's like when your buddy dates like 50 different people and it never lasts longer than like 2 months. And you're sitting there and he's like, I don't know. I just can't figure it out, man. I don't know what the problem is. It's like, well, the common denominator is you. So you're probably the problem. Like it's either you or all 50 of these people. It's probably you. And with the Browns, like it could be these thousands of people who have passed through the organization over the last decade, or it could just be Jimmy Haslam. I'm going to go with Jimmy Haslam. All right. Last thing we got to get through here before we got Heisler coming in here in a few minutes. If you combine Jets and the Falcons, and I say this because they played on Monday night before recording this. If you combine those rosters, and you could put them in either conference, probably the NFC because it's easier conference. Could and would they make the playoffs?
This was a wild thought exercise, but I have to go with no. I mean, the Falcons might be
close.
The absolute. Yeah, like the Falcons, in my opinion, are going to be the worst team in the league. Like they are unbelievably bad. Like they got apparently, from what I read about training camp reports, the Jets owned them all week in joint practices. The Jets, without Zach Wilson, with Mekhi Becton out. The Jets, who are in a bad spot, dominated the Falcons all week in camp. I know what happened in the first half yesterday, but like, I don't care. Like the Jets weren't playing their starters. Like it doesn't matter. And like, then you go to the Jets side. The reports before Zach Wilson's injury were that Joe Flacco looked better than him in camp. I've seen Joe Flacco play recently. That's not a good thing. That's a horrible situation to be in. I honestly think that I'm high on the Jets' future. I like a lot of the pieces that the Jets have on the roster. And I think in 2023, they could be considered a sleeper. But I think that when you combine the injuries that are already piling up for that team and, Zach Wilson being out and the fact that these guys are young and inexperienced, I think they're still at minimum a year away, and the Falcons are a lot of years away. And I hope they really enjoy Bryce Young and CJ Stroud next year, because that's where they're headed.
If you're Bryce Young and CJ Stroud, you're either like, hey, Atlanta's a cool city, and like you're excited about that. You're like, oh, please God, no. Like, this is so bad. I've been to Atlanta, cool place. I wouldn't mind it. But I think, look, the bottom line is, hell no. These teams, I was sitting there watching some of that last night. I'm like, these teams are atrocious. By the way, I'm with you. I think the Falcons are the worst team in football. Okay, I would argue that most fans could not on the team, and I wouldn't blame them.
Oh yeah,
I mean, they are brutal. But then you look at the Jets. My question is, who is the quarterback on that proposed team? Who, Marcus Mariota? Like, he's supposed to make the playoffs? If you combine, okay, so now what is it? Like, when you go 3 wide with this group, right? You've got Pitts, that's great. You have who exactly? You have Garrett Wilson, you've got Corey Davis, and then I don't know. Drake London, right? I mean, it's got to be the 2 rookies, right? And then you've got Corey Davis. Like, it's if those rookies are good, it's okay. If they're not good, it's abysmal. Like, their offensive line still wouldn't be good. It's so bad. I was literally watching it thinking, if you took these 2 teams, put them together, they'd maybe win 6 games. It is hideous football. Let's bring in Ben Heisler, managing editor over at BetSided, of course, joins us every week. Heisler, what's going on? Welcome to the party.
Fellas, Cody, congrats on the new hosting opportunity with Verderame. I got a chance to meet Cody, Matt, when I first got going here, once he started hosting Green on the Greens with our guy, Ian McMillan. So Cody's locked in, man. Like, already a couple winners on the PGA side, on the NFL side. This is a perfect fit. So excited to keep this going with another familiar face.
Well,
I thought you were going to bring up the fact that I worked at Wendy's, Ben, because that was actually the first time that we met.
Yeah, we were telling stories about like our first jobs, and I was like, I worked as a grocery store bag boy, and then Cody's like, well, where do I begin? And like there was just that like all these insane jobs that you had from back in the day that really make for some good stories. I don't want to tease all of them, but I feel like, now that you're going to be co-hosting the show, inevitably a handful of them are going to come out over the course of conversation.
Oh, absolutely. I'm sure I can relate the Falcons and the Jets to my time working the late night drive-thru at Wendy's pretty easily.
Look, I never had a job that I was like, this is really bad. Although I did work as a telemarketer at my college, which that led to some interesting conversations. But because they give you a script. And it's the telefund, right? So basically what you're doing is you're calling up all these people who've graduated and you're begging them for money. I mean, that's essentially what, like, the damn school doesn't make enough, okay? And so you're calling up these people and you get this huge stack at the start of the semester. And it's like, here's Marge, and she graduated in 1940. Like, son of a bitch. Marge has got to be like 90 some odd years old. And like the stack of people that you start with, they've never donated, right? So I graduated in 2009. So you've got to factor in that person had been graduated for 65 plus years. Call up. Most of the time, they don't even answer the phone, right? They might have passed away. Who knows, right? They don't even answer the phone, right? So then you get
a good reason not to pick up the phone,
right? Selfishly, they don't pick up the phone because they passed on. And so now I got to call these people while the phone rings and the EMT's zipping up the bag, and there's nobody answering the phone. And then I finally get somebody on the phone, and I've got to read this godforsaken script. It's like, hi, I'm Matt Verderame. I'm a sophomore here at SUNY Oswego, and I'm with the SUNY Oswego I'd click. So after about the 10th time of doing that, I was like, I'm not reading the script anymore. I don't care. So I call this guy who's from like just outside Boston, Massachusetts, or at least he lives there, answers the phone. Kind of gruffly, who is this? What? I'm like, yeah, listen, hi. My name's Matt Verder. I'm at SUNY Oswego. Are you asking for money? And I didn't even answer him. I was like, Ted Williams is the greatest hitter of all time. And he was like, he is the greatest hitter of all time. And then we had like an hour-long conversation, and he donated money. And from that point on, That did not always work, by the way. But from that point on, that was it. Right? Like I would just come up with anything I could possibly think of to talk to these people, get them on the phone, keep them talking. That had to be the worst job I ever had. But the late night drive through a Wendy's probably beats that by a pretty significant margin.
Yeah, the worst part is I'm not even sure that's the worst one I had. So we'll get into that, I'm sure, in the future.
We'll get there. Well, if we get into the betting portion of this, it should be good. Of course, you got high. Cody is the people learn. So, the bet on the hot dog eating. Did you bet, by the way?
Absolutely. The under on Joey Chestnut's hot dogs was an absolute lock. So that was an easy win.
Well, I'm the joke because you're money. And I'm all right, Heis, what do we have for today?
Yeah, so we had some fun last week going through some of these crazy playoff liabilities for some of the sports books, and we were talking about your guy Derek Carr, how all of a sudden he's moved up the charts from where he was to start the offseason for leading the NFL in passing yards and touchdowns, and how he's become the most bet on name. And now all of a sudden sports books are panicking a lot with somebody like Carr went through the list of rushing leaders. I wanted to bring up the BetMGM top 3 biggest liabilities to make or miss the playoffs and get a sense of whether or not you think it's a good bet or not. I have a feeling I know where you're going to go, but based on the odds that are involved, maybe you change your mind. So let's start with the number 3 team. We'll go 3, 2, 1 on this list, and I'm curious to hear from you guys here. The Minnesota Vikings opened up at plus 100. So basically, even money, you bet $100, you'd win $100 for them to make the playoffs. But they're the number 3 liability on the board. So they do not want the Vikings to make the playoffs. They have since moved their odds to make the playoffs from even money to minus 115. So a $115 bet would win you $100. Good bet on the Vikings at even money to make or miss, or excuse me, to make the playoffs this year?
I think it's a good bet. I mean, we actually just talked about, whether or not the Vikings or the Saints were more likely to win the division. And I think they're less likely than the Saints to win their division. But I think to make the playoffs, I think that's a pretty fair bet. I'm high on the offense under Kevin O'Connell. I think it's going to be actually a pretty special unit because of all the talent that's there. I think Kirk Cousins can maneuver offense that's, more catered to him, which I think O'Connell will do. I am slightly concerned about the defense, but also I just think that offense is going to carry them to probably 10 wins. And so I think that's probably enough in an NFC that isn't deep in terms of quality of teams. I think that's enough to get the playoffs. So even money, yeah, I like those odds a lot.
What do you think, Verderame?
I do too. Look, here's how I look at the NFC. The Rams, the Packers, and the Bucks, I think, are the 3 locks to make the playoffs in some capacity. Okay. I think Cody's Cowboys here, I think, are probably a good bet to make the playoffs. I like Philly as well. The Niners, if you have a good version of Trey Lance, are a playoff team. After that, Panthers and Falcons, garbage. Okay, Seahawks, garbage. Lions and Bears, I don't think the Lions are total garbage. I don't think they're a playoff team. The Bears are a landfill of a franchise. Giants, not good. Washington, I don't think it's good. So that leaves you basically with the Vikings, the Cardinals, and the Saints. I think the Vikings are at least one of the top 2 teams in that group. And even though I said off the top 6 of the teams, like one team will probably get hurt, one team will underperform. So yeah, I like the Vikings to make the playoffs.
I like them too. And I think there's a reason why you saw some of that money move. It's because there is confidence that their offense is going to be far more, I wouldn't say far more productive, because the numbers that Cousins has actually put up over the last handful of years have been fairly impressive. Now, a lot of it is empty calories, but it is an offense that is going to better match up with his ability to try and get the ball out quick. You have Justin Jefferson already have taken 2 monster steps in his first 2 years. Hopefully Thielen can keep himself healthy. Their tight end this year, Irv Smith, is hopefully healthy as well. And the offensive line should be better. So you're right. That offense is going to be good. And I still think they have a decent enough pass rush in a bad division where they should be able to get themselves to at least 10 wins. The over-under for them is 9, with a lot of heavy movement towards the over. So I think that's setting up for Minnesota to probably back in to at least one of the late wild card spots for 2022. So I'm with you guys. I think even money, if you got it then, is a good bet. Even if you get them now at minus 115, I still think that's a strong number to jump on. Here's the second team on the list. And we talked about it a little bit last week, so I'm curious to get Cody's take on this as well. The Detroit Lions, the public is betting on heavily to make the playoffs. Now, their win total is only 6.5, but they are 5-1 to sneak into the postseason out of the NFC. That line has since moved from 5-1 to plus 350, so 3.5-1. If you're betting on them now, 3.5-1, do you feel like that's still good value for the Lions to at least surprise some people this year?
See, those are two different questions to me because I think they are going to surprise some people. I think they're going to be better than that 6.5 win total is set, but I still just don't see them making the playoffs. I think you have to be impressed with the job that Dan Campbell has done. Like we were talking earlier about Mike Tomlin's always going to have the Steelers ready to fight. Dan Campbell's going to have these guys ready to fight. There's no question about that at all. But at the same time, I'm counting 2 losses to the Packers right off the bat. They just don't have the talent to match up with the Packers. I think the same could be said for their matchups against the Vikings. So you're already putting them at 2 and 4 in the division. So that's an uphill climb from there. And I just think making the playoffs is a really tough ask for this team who, let's face it, Jared Goff is still their quarterback. That's going to limit your ceiling offensively. I like some of the pieces around him. I think that offensive line is actually quite impressive, and I think the defense is going to be improved. I actually bet their alternate win total at over 7.5 because I think this is an 8-win team. I like that a lot. I got that at plus 155, so I really like the value there. But at still 8 and 9 is not going to get you into the playoffs.
I actually agree with Jay Ward. I think they're more like I actually go 7-win. I think they're about a 7-win team. Look, although they could get to 8. Jared Goff quarterbacking that team is like, if to stick with the Detroit Motor City idea of a reference, it's like if you look at a car and you're like, wow, that's a really nice, that's a Dodge Charger souped up. That's a really nice Dodge Charger. And then you look under the hood and there's no engine. Like, oh, okay. And then Detroit's like, Dan Campbell's like, look, next year we're going to draft an engine, but this year we got to push it. All right, well, it's a nice looking car. You got to push the damn thing and lose its value. Okay. And so I like the Lions pieces. I believe in the front office. You got Brad Holmes there. John Dorsey's there. John Dorsey, say whatever you want. You go find me somebody who's drafted better than John Dorsey in the last decade. I mean, he is drafted. He built that Chiefs team in a lot of ways. He went to Cleveland. He built them into a playoff team. And I like Dan Campbell. Dan Campbell's one of those guys that players will love because he's real. Like that's you. You're not getting the Matt Patricia, like, I'm Bill Belichick. No, you're not Bill Belichick. You're Matt Patricia, which is why you're fired. Like, this is now a real coach who actually is a real person. I think Detroit's frisky, and I think they're tough, and I think they're going to beat a couple teams this year that you're surprised by it, but I can't see them in the playoffs.
Yeah, I think we're all in agreement on this assessment as well. I'm going to take your analogy one step further, Verderame. I like the comp for Goff leading this Lions team with a nice looking car, but there's no engine. If anything, I think collectively as the team, the only way that they can make that car run is to have it be like a Flintstone car where all of them are moving their feet collectively together. Like, there's a lot of good pieces that can move the car forward, but if the guy who's driving the car can't really do anything, it can only go so far. So they're going to be competitive, but reaching for the playoffs, especially with some more improved NFC teams. Now, it's not the AFC where you have 9-10 teams that have a very realistic shot at making the postseason, maybe even more. It is a very, very tough conference. But the Lions at plus 350, at least at this point, does not feel like the value we thought. It'll be compelling because I think for the first portion of the season, they'll be hanging around thinking that you have a chance to cash in on 3.5-1 odds. Probably not going to happen, at least for this year. Final one on the board. The New York Jets at 9-1 to make the postseason is BetMGM's number one liability, to the point where they have now taken that bet off the board. They haven't even adjusted the odds. They're just saying, you know what? We have so much money on the New York Jets right now at 9-1 to make the postseason that for us to even put it back on the board doesn't even make sense for us. It is a very difficult conference. But if you're going at it with 9-1 odds, do you see any value in the New York Jets possibly making the postseason? But
see, this shit always kills me with bettors, right? Like, you feel like, oh, this guy put $1,000 down on the Bears to win the Super Bowl at 75-1. It's like, no. He set $1,000 on fire with 75-1 odds. Like that's what he did. Like, let's be realistic, right? If you were betting on the Jets to make the playoffs, you are betting on about 8 other teams in the AFC forfeiting games because there is no world where the Jets should make the playoffs in the AFC. Just take it from this perspective. Think about the quarterbacks in this conference. Mahomes, Carr, Wilson, Herbert, just in the West, okay? Then you've got Ryan in the South. We'll see it with Trevor Lawrence. I still believe in Trevor Lawrence quite a bit, but we'll see. You get to the North, Lamar, Burrow. You've got Watson at some point, putting him aside. Then you've got Allen in the AFC East. You're telling me that the Jets are going to find a way to make the playoffs. Cody and I just did a segment on this where we said if you combine the Jets and the Falcons, they still would not come close to making the playoffs. Sans being combined with the Falcons, I think the Jets are about a 5-win football team. Their schedule the first 3 months of the year is brutal. I don't care if they give me 50-1 odds. I wouldn't bet on the Jets.
Yeah, this reminded me of the scene from The Office when Kevin Malone says, if someone gives you 10,000-1 odds on anything, you take it. But 9-1 is not 10,000-1. So there's no way I would touch this bet with this team. Like I told Verderame, like I think that the Jets, I like a lot of the pieces. I really do, but the pieces don't fit yet. The puzzle's not complete. And I mean, Joe Flacco's starting the year at quarterback, and combine that with a brutal schedule, like my God, this is not going to be pretty. Like Verderame said, I don't think you're betting on 8, injuries or bad things to happen, but like you're basically betting on, okay, if Josh Allen and Mac Jones both got hurt, maybe the Jets could win the AFC East at 8-9. You know what I mean? Like that's what you're betting on.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense, especially given the fact that there's just too many other teams in their way. And that's what I think it is. You're right. It's the Kevin Malone theory with far shorter odds. And you're more likely to take the big pot of chili and spill it all over the floor with whatever money you decide to put down there. So it's weird that all three of us are in agreement. It's probably a terrible sign for things to come. But sure enough, 9-1, not the juice, far not worth the squeeze in trying to consider a New York Jets team to come and make the postseason, especially in that division. And by the way, a little bit later on Daily Bet Slip today, Donovan Spoon and I are going to be talking about worst to first teams based on their division odds and who is likely to be that team this year. I can tell you with almost certainty that neither of us are going to be taking the New York Jets for that.
If it's not the Ravens, who the hell is it? Denver?
I don't know. The Ravens were at the top of my list, and if I'm really starting to consider anything else, I feel like that's a time to panic.
I mean,
Denver, if you want to roll, I think you can make a case for the Jaguars. They have an adult in the room.
You know what? You're not wrong there.
Yeah,
we've talked about that on the show.
And Denver is also possibly worth consideration, but again, I have concerns about their defense. It's not going to be the Lions, not going to be the Panthers, certainly not going to be the Seahawks.
No,
yeah, it's coming out of the AFC with either Denver or Jacksonville or Baltimore, and everybody else you can basically just say, nah, ain't gonna happen.
I agree with Cody's call though. We've talked about this. Like Jacksonville, I think is going to be better than people think. Like I'm picking Indianapolis in that division, but I wouldn't be shocked if you told me Jacksonville went 9-8 and found a way to win that division. Like I wouldn't be stunned. I'd be like, okay. Maybe they needed Indy to have a few injuries or something, and maybe Tennessee kind of just meandered through the year. But I could see it. Like, Jacksonville's a real coach. Lawrence is going to actually be able to play real football. And while I think they overspent quite a bit in free agency, they still got good players. So they should be – now, how well they sustain that, I have no idea. But in terms of next year, I agree. I think Baltimore, though, for me, Baltimore's got to be the pick. Like – that team had no business being a last place team last year. And even though they were last place, if they missed to win the division by 2 games. So I think like for Denver's got a much harder climb. The Chiefs are still really, really good. The Chargers, in my opinion, are better than Denver. Like the Raiders, I think are worse than Denver, but the Raiders could absolutely beat them in a game and split the season series. Like I'm not predicting this, but if Denver went 1-5 in the AFC West, I wouldn't be stunned. Like, I think they'll be better than that. But if you said to me, yeah, they split with the Raiders and the Chargers and Chiefs swept them, I'd be like, all right. I mean, possible. I think they're probably more like 2-4, 3-3. But the point stands, they can win 10 games in that division to be in third place.
Mm-hmm.
The level of variance for the Broncos, like we talked about this last week, we don't know if they're a division-winning team or if they're just going to bottom out because of all the holes that they still have on this team. And it's still a first-year head coach, and it's still a first-year quarterback trying to combine forces. It could work out spectacularly. It could also, I don't want to say go down in flames because I still think there's enough talent there, but it's certainly not a lock that they're a postseason team, let alone, a double-digit win team, even though that's where the consensus lines
I know we're wrapping up. I know we're wrapping up in a few minutes, but I got to just say, like, this whole thing with Denver this offseason about Russ has like an office at the building, and he doesn't always have to run practice reps because he's visualizing practice reps. You hear all this stuff and everybody's like fawning all of this. And my response is like, does he ever like just play football? And like, do we ever talk about the fact that he looks good at football? Obviously he's out there practicing, but like my point is you never hear like, man, he looks unbelievable at practice. You just hear like, yeah, they got that let's ride slogan and he's visualizing winning games. And he and Hackett are really innovative, which listen, all that stuff's fine and well. But you literally never hear anything football related about Denver, ever. It's just all this other stuff out of Dove Valley. And you wonder, like, is it because it's just interesting and it's different and they're going to win 12 games and it's all going to be fine? Or is it because when you actually see them on the field, it's not that impressive and the other stuff's a lot more impressive? I don't know. Denver, to me, is the hardest team in the AFC to pick. They really are. I could see them winning 12 games. I could see them winning 8 games. I don't know where that team lands, but it's just been a bizarre offseason about everything that doesn't have to do with them actually playing football.
Yeah, I mean, since Ben's here, I'll say I am staying completely away from any AFC West like over/under win totals or anything because that is the hardest division to read because Denver's an unknown commodity, like you just said, and I think the Raiders fall in the same boat. Like, yeah, they have Devontae Adams. Yeah, they should be improved offensively, but what is Devontae Adams without Aaron Rodgers? Like Derek Carr and him have a rapport, but they're two very different quarterbacks, and so I think that, and then the Chargers and Chiefs, like. I think they're clearly the two best teams in the division, but they also have a raised level of competition in the division around them. So I think that division could be a sneaky dumpster fire. And I just don't like in terms of like trying to pick in terms of gambling, I should say. Not like I think it's a very good division, but a dumpster fire in terms of gambling. And so I'm staying completely away from betting anything in there because there's too many unknown factors that I can't really calculate.
Yeah, and I even got a tip, and I'm trying to remember if I mentioned it on the show last week from some a pretty well-connected source inside the sports betting business who says that there's going to be a lot of money coming in late on the Chiefs under for their win total this year, which surprised me given everything that we've heard about this team so far through training camp, through the preseason, their ability to be able to spread the offense around, make it a little bit more well-rounded, the improvements to the defensive line, Karlaftis in the pass rush. I think it's more likely a result of a very, very tough division, more so than Tyreek Hill being gone. The Chiefs have done it, I think, 5 consecutive years, or at least 6. 4 out of the last 5 years where they've gone above 11 wins. So,
they've won 6 straight division titles, and in Andy Reid's tenure, this will be his 10th year. So he's had 9 seasons. They've only won less than double digits once. They won 9 games. And I think in 20, Mahomes, the last year before he started, they went 10-6. Other than that, they've won 11 plus every single one of those years. I will say this is obviously someone who's also a Chiefs fan, so factor that in. I think this team will feel the gauntlet early because defensively they have a lot of moving parts. They're young. I also, what is the line? 10.5 right now?
It was either 11 or 10.5. I think where the money started to come in was when they were on 11.
Okay. I will say right now, my prediction for them, they will win at least 12 games. And I think I shouldn't say I think they will win 12 games. I think that will be where they're at. I think higher than that's difficult based on the schedule. I think any AFC team is going to have a hard time winning more than that. I think less than that. Could they go 11-6? Yeah. Absolutely. I think the hard thing with them is just they historically under Andy Reid beat the hell out of the division. They just beat up on those teams. Look, I get the division's better. But I still think in the end, like even if they go 4-2 in that division, they also play the AFC South. That could be 4-0. That could just be boom, 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 boom. And then what? They've got to beat Arizona. I mean, they did that. That's 10 wins. They got to win one of the game. Like they made the Rams at home, or so it's going to be interesting. The Chiefs play a very hard schedule. My biggest question is week 18. The Chargers play Denver. How big of a crap show is that game? Like, is it the Chargers never win a big game ever, and you've got the Broncos, who nobody has any clue what's happening. I could easily see that being the Sunday night game, week 18. And it's just like it's the same thing like it was last year with the Chargers and Raiders. Like you've got to win to get in. And it's just an absolute shit show for 60 minutes. Like all this crap. Then Wilson wins it on like a bomb with a minute to go. That division is going to be fascinating. I get people to bet the under. I do. I just think with Reed and Mahomes and that offensive line, like I think they're winning at least 11 games.
Yeah, it's hard to see it any other way other than the fact that if you buy the rest of the competition really coming up,
sure.
But I mean, you saw the Chargers with all that offensive talent still finish 7-9 a season ago. You still saw Denver with a good defense, albeit not a great defense, finish at 7-10. And then the Raiders probably played a little bit above their skis in the midst of everything going on, and even adding Devontae Adams. We know they're going to score, but they're not going to be able to stop anybody. In fact, we were talking about the Lions a little bit before. My dog is weighing in on whatever underdogs we're talking about now. Do you mind? The Lions kind of remind me of the Raiders defense, where they have a pretty good line, but outside of the line, they're not stopping anybody. Like that's just going to be a disaster in that secondary for the 2022 season.
I agree. Look, we'll let you go as we're up against time, and your dog desperately needs your attention. So we will go check out Daily Bet Slip every day. Heisler, is it 4:00 Central?
4:00 Central, 5:00 Eastern.
Okay.
Usually two of us from the BetSided team going through best bets of the night. We'll break down the biggest game that everybody's talking about. Like I said, today we're going to be going over our favorite worst to first division odds teams in the NFL for this season. So it should be a fun show. Hopefully you guys check us out 5 Eastern, 4 Central today.
Absolutely. Ben Heisler, BetSided, as always here. Sir, thank you very much. Appreciate you coming on as always.
Good to see you, fellas.
Good to see you, Ben.
All right. We got to close this thing up. We get, as Cody, we do every week. We'll have just kind of what's going on in your life. I'll lead off, kind of give an example. Look, I am very happy that the Panthers named Baker Mayfield the starter because I can't take it anymore. The idea that was ever a competition was insane. I'm glad it's done. I will pivot actually to your world of college football. As you know, and many people know, I am not Joe college football by any stretch of the imagination. I am casual. I will sit down and watch it just about every Saturday, but I am by no means, I don't have a team. I'm not really invested. When I was a kid, I was like kind of into Notre Dame because of Rudy, which I still say is my favorite movie of all time. It's a great movie. Anybody who goes against it, I'll slap down. But I don't have a team that I'm like deeply invested in. Growing up in New York, who are you going to be invested in? Syracuse? That's no way to live. Okay. Rutgers? Also no way to live. My ex-girlfriend lived a mile from Rutgers, and I didn't know one person who cared about Rutgers even where she lived. So can't get there. I will watch it, but the reason I bring it up is these conferences in college football, it's just enough already. It's to the point now. We got USC and UCLA coming to the Big Ten. Can't wait for UCLA and Nebraska to get after it in mid-November in Lincoln. That ought to be awesome. And then now you got maybe Oregon's coming in. It feels like the Pac-12 is about to be a thing of the past, right? I still think if you combined all these conferences and pit them against the SEC, they'd still lose. But it's, you know better than me where all this is going. I will just say this. The greed that has absolutely destroyed all these conferences so these schools can make more money as if they weren't already making enough money, it drives me nuts. Like, I love good rivalries in sports, and it feels like all that's going to shit because we're going to have to sit through now what's probably going to be Utah, Wisconsin here in a couple of years. I'm just, and by the way, change the name of the fucking conference, okay? You're not the Big Ten anymore, for Christ's sake. You're like the Big 27, all right? Change the name of the conference. this idea that you're the Big Ten, you have 14 schools in it or whatever the hell it is at this point, drives me nuts. You're not the Big Ten. Stop it. It's crazy. And I don't know where it's all going, but I got to tell you, like an old man, I'm sure on the hill right now, I don't like it.
No, I mean, the traditionalist in me as a college football fan really hates it too. I think where we're honestly heading is we're heading towards eventually 2 super conferences where, basically, I mean, their names will change most likely, but we're looking like, SEC, Big Ten, and whoever wins those 2 conferences plays for the national championship. I think that's where we're heading in college football. And honestly, I hate that. I hate that that's where we'd be heading.
Well, you know what? Fuck it. I hope they keep the name Big Ten if that happens. Just keep it. I want 35 teams in it. But then and you're probably right, man. God knows you're more plugged into all this than I am. But then that begs the question. So if that happens, okay, how does that all work out? What are you gonna do? Play like a 28 game schedule, or is it just you're gonna have like 2 conferences within the conference and you're gonna play I don't. How the hell does any of this look? I feel like this is insane.
I mean, it is. And honestly, I spoke too soon. I said, the winner of each conference. But what's probably actually going to happen is playoff expansion is already coming. They're going to expand it from 4 teams.
Oh, yeah.
And so, yeah, you're probably going to end up with, I would probably say 16 teams because, that'll give you, 8 games to grab more money from, 8 marquee games in the playoff. And so that'll kind of alleviate the idea of like a 28 game schedule because you'll get to see these teams in the playoffs, the ones who performed the best in their 12 game schedule. But it's heading towards a not good place and a place that's going to make college football basically a minor league pro football thing, especially with the NIL money that's come in if that's not legislated soon. So yeah, we're not headed to a good spot for college football.
I mean, and it's like, what do you do with the rest of these programs? Then what? What is Boise State going to get shooed into the SEC or something? Or it's just the whole. Look, I am somebody as much as I don't care about college football. I loved college basketball, and I nowadays having kids, I more will kind of tune in after the new year and start watching a conference play. I'm a St. John's fan. It's painful. It is what it is. But I always, even more than that as a kid, I loved the Big East. Right, I love the Big East. Mm-hmm. When they broke that up, I understood it, but they broke it up. And then they started to frantically, they're like, we're going to get San Diego State in here, which look it up was a real thing. They wanted San Diego State in the Big East. And thank God somebody stepped up and was like, holy shit, we cannot have that happen. And then you know what? To their credit, they rejiggered the conference, and it's not what it once was, but it's at least a really good, competitive, fun basketball conference. You get Xavier in there. You got Creighton in there. You got Butler in there. You kept the schools, the Villanovas of the world. That's exciting. I think UConn's even back now in the Big East, if memory serves. So that's nice. You still have Seton Hall. My point is, while it's certainly changed and will never be the same, there's no Syracuse anymore. It still is a basketball conference. It's recognizable. College football, what are you going to do with half these schools? What's going to happen to Coastal Carolina? Are they just going to play D2 now? It's just, I hate the way that greed has just busted this thing up in a wild way. And yet you still have these people like Dabo Sweeney over at Clemson, who's more concerned that his center's got to deal with a car wash company. What are you worried about? You're getting paid $8 million a year, you greedy son of a bitch. You don't have to worry about that kid making $10,000 so he can pay for his books. It's the way that sport has been run forever is insane. My big prediction, the NCAA will not exist in about 10 years. They are going to push that thing out the door and just go with their own rules and their own governing body.
Oh, it's already happening. There was a report last week, I think it was, that the College Football Playoff Committee is already discussing how they can break away from the NCAA. So, I mean, that's already happening. I think 10 years is probably too long of a timeline, if I'm being honest with you.
All right.
So, I mean, yeah, and what you said about basketball is interesting because I don't, everything in basketball for the most part, you've got Oklahoma and Texas coming to the SEC and, some shuffling in the Big 12 and Pac-12 and Big 10. But, at the same time, it's still not heading towards the same places that college football is. So it's going to be interesting to see how another, big revenue sport is affected by all of this.
Yeah, it really is. I'm fascinated by it. All right, what's going on in your life, Cody? What's happening other than being shoehorned here into Stacking the Box? Being forced into it? What's going on in your life?
I got to tell you, as you will learn, I am a diehard Cowboys fan. Have been my entire life, even though I'm from North Carolina. But one thing that's just really pissing me off is people who are detracting from Dak Prescott because Amari Cooper's gone, and I think that is just a complete mischaracterization of what's going to happen with Dak Prescott this season. I think we see the best season yet of Dak Prescott's career this year, because you look at him last year, and yes, he had all the weapons. He had this, that, and the other, but he wasn't healthy at all. He was coming off that ankle injury in 2020, which was a hell of an injury to be coming back from. Like that, we all saw it happen. It was not something you would wish on anyone. And then, I think it was week 4 or 5, he strained his calf and had to deal with that, and it was affecting the way he planted the entire season. You could watch game film and see the way that he was planning was not the same. So yes, he had Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb, but that offense was not thriving because I think that you're looking at a player who's now fully healthy. He has a legitimate number 1 wide receiver in CeeDee Lamb. People are forgetting about Dalton Schultz. Dalton Schultz was great as a receiving tight end last year.
Very good.
He was great. And so he's back this year. I'm high on some of the rookies. I like Jalen Tolbert. I think he's going to take some ironing out because he's coming from South Alabama. So I think, there's going to be some adjustment to the pro level, but I think he's good. Tony Pollard is a terrific target out of the backfield that I think we're going to use I think Kellen Moore can use in the slot a lot this year. And I think we're going to see Dak Prescott have the best season of his career this year, despite the fact that he lost Amari Cooper.
I like it. I like the confidence. I'm interested to see how it's going to play out, because I think they're going to be a lot better than people think. My biggest concern is your coach. Your coach scares the hell out of me.
I can't argue with that in the slightest. I'm not saying we're going to go win the Super Bowl because Dak Prescott has the best season of his career. There's a 100% chance that the Cowboys win 11 games, as they tend to do, and then lose in the first round of the playoffs because Mike McCarthy's over there twiddling his thumbs and doing whatever the fuck. But
yeah, as you guys take 18 more penalties. But yeah, I will definitely I'll be keeping an eye. A good old Justin Andrews, a college buddy who's joining the chat for the first time. Welcome. A Broncos fan. You missed plenty of Broncos content, Andrews. You're late. But that being said, Cody, welcome to the show. Carm, we barely knew ye. Man's in a field somewhere in Northwestern. He's going to be going to Ireland. Hopefully they win, because that's a hell of a trip to make if they lose. Who are they even playing?
Nebraska.
Yeah, they're probably going to lose. All right.
I know.
Yeah. That's a shame. But listen, to Carm, hopefully Carm's getting comped. I hope so. He's paying to go out there. It's brutal. All right. Hey, thank you, everybody, for watching Stacking the Box. We'll be back again next Tuesday. Cody and I, Ben Heisler. We're getting close to the season. We got one more August show, and then we got our big preview show first week of September, and then that's it, man. We're back. We got Bills Rams September 8th, whole rest of the slate on September 11th. Can't wait to get it going. Can't wait to see how things shake out. Should be a really fun year. Cody, welcome aboard, man. Thanks for joining us. And I look forward to going through the season with you.
Absolutely, man. I'm excited. It's going to be a fun season. We're already amped up about some stuff before we've seen any real football played. So I think it's going to be good.
All right. Hey, for Cody Williams, I am Matt Verderame. Thanks for watching Stacking the Box. If you're listening, thanks for listening wherever you get your podcast, and subscribe to the Stacking the Box YouTube page. We had over 2,000 people subscribe last week. Be the next person. All right. Thanks so much for listening. Talk to you again next week.